And what really hit that idea home was when we started looking at the control subject. And so as you see here, here's our control subject who did not wear the fire suit, didn't do anything, just stood there and watched the race. They had a higher core temperature than both teams. And we started thinking, well, that's really unique. Why is that going on? And this is what kind of summed up the idea of that these guys are athletes. Okay? Their training has allowed them to work at this lower core temperature, adapt to this ability. And over here, we didn't see much of a difference in heart rate between the two teams. Maybe over on the core temperature that the team 2 had a slightly lower core temperature, but no significant difference. And actually, if we expand the race out, like Dr. Lightfoot mentioned that we might have, we probably would have seen something there. And this is where kind of the big kicker, the big message to NASCAR came in, was that when you start looking at the pit stop data, the Team 2 was 1 second faster than Team 1. And you start thinking, well, okay, you train the same, your years of experience are the same, you know, everything's kind of the same. What's the difference? Why are you guys faster? Are you just that much better? And we looked at the core temperature data and we saw that trend that the Team 2 might have a lower core temperature. And I remember I was sitting with the guys talking about them, and the strength coach, great guy, said, well, you know, does it have anything to do with the fact that what time we train? And I looked at it and I was like, well, what time do you guys train at? And he said, well, we all do resistance training in the morning, but when you practice pit stops, the number 1 team does it at 8 in the morning. And I was like, you guys are all in the fire gear and all that stuff. I was like, yeah. And I said, well, what time does the number 2 team? 2 in the afternoon. In Charlotte, North Carolina, for all these who've been in the southeast, you know that can get up to be 90 degrees, rather humid. And so what we started thinking was that, yeah, the trained response is that these guys practice pit stops in the afternoon, in the fire protection gear, in the heat, and that allows for them to adapt to the race situation and lets them have a second faster pit stop, which is great from the standpoint of 1 second. Like I said, Rick Hendrick's favorite quote. So I know you guys might be thinking, 1 second, that's 1 second. Why is that important? Kind of give you guys a cost analysis here. One team spent, I believe it was $700,000 on a shock absorber. One shock absorber for one track to see if it could increase their time by 25 hundredths of a second. $700,000 for 25 hundredths of a second, or restructuring your daily schedule for 1 second. Kind of an interesting idea right there, and it was great to see this, and we took it to them and they loved this idea, and they've now switched their time data over to all teams practicing in the afternoon in the fire protection gear. So like I said, kind of summarizing this study up, could have had a psychological component to the high heart rate we saw, but most likely something to do with the thermal regulation aspect of it. The idea that the control subject had a higher core temperature than the pit crews gives us the idea that there is a trained response. These guys are athletes and that they're having to adapt to this situation that they compete in. And lastly, the key to this study was practice in the afternoon, in the similar environment, in the gear, really allows for adaptation for race settings. So these are, as wrapping up, these are my keys to victory lane and to research in motorsport physiology as we go with that. This was taken at Atlanta Motor Speedway on a very early morning in victory lane. So the first thing is that we found from the pit study was that there is an athletic component with these guys being flexible and having a high agility. Lastly, restructuring the training program could prevent this loss of lean mass seen in the off-season and the beginning of the season, which will allow for performance at the optimal races during February, March, that time frame. And lastly, training in a similar heat environment allows for better pit stops during this race season. I have to give some acknowledgement to some people. Obviously, all this stuff I did, I could not have done it without the help from NASCAR. Some of the teams I've worked with, Hendrick, Ganassi, Michael Waltrip, Stuart Haas. I will say that if you're ever going to work with a group of guys and work with a group of athletes, this is the group to do it with. They're all very nice, and they all really want to learn from this. To them, they look at this as, you're coming to help them make their job better, and they want to do whatever they can. So there's no ego, there's no combativeness. I would call them up and say, hey, do you want to try this? And be like, yeah, sounds great, Dave, let's do it. The only issue is the logistics of managing this. Like I said, their time is very constrained, and so working with them around that is always an issue right there. And lastly, there's some great people at UNC Charlotte, specifically Dr. Lightfoot, who let me come and work with them after I just showed up one day. So, and guys, like I said, it was a lot of fun. I had a great time doing it. I look forward to working with these guys in the future in some sort of capacity, and it was great talking to you guys about it. So any questions?
I'm interested in hearing more about how you mentioned that they aren't really doing much training or proper nutrition during their off season.
Mm-hmm.
When do they actually come back and start that training? Is it right before the racing starts? Are they guaranteed their position? Do they need to get back into shape before?
Oh no, great question. So around Thanksgiving, they scatter. They come back January 3rd, and their job primarily is to build the cars. They start back resistance training around the middle of January, so that gives them 1 month till the first race. So it's a time crunch to be able to do that, and like we saw from that data, it's not really helping much. As for the nutrition aspect of it, that is probably the one area that they're lacking in. I will say there is a company, and the name's blank, I believe it's Racing Meals, that provides ready-made meals that you have to microwave that are supposed to be low in fat, low in salt, ready to kind of go. Some teams use that. Other teams use here's your $2 allowance, go buy a Martinsville hot dog. So you can imagine nutrition is one area that's really lacking in that aspect. And on that note, so is hydration. One of the things I didn't talk about was in the core term study, we didn't measure hydration intake, and the reason was there really wasn't hydration intake. So they might have one soda or a Gatorade that they drank over 4 hours. And if you can think about what they're doing, that would kind of be an issue right there. So no, about a month from when they have the time to go back. And their position is secure. They've signed their contract that this guy's going to be a changer for that race, for that season.
And let me add to that. It was a good question. NASCAR became very interested in that in 2002, 2003, something like that. They actually hired a full-time RD at NASCAR there based in Concord and made her services available to all the teams, and they had one team take her up on it. And after 3 years or so, they let her go because she didn't have anything to do. And we actually wound up hiring her at Charlotte, and she did some consulting with some of the teams that got interested a little bit later on. But there's been more interested in the physiological testing than there has been in any of the nutrition stuff. They like fried chicken too much.
Actually, Hendricks and JGR have also hired Dave Ellis, who's already in CSCS.
That's good, yeah.
Consulting with there now.
Yeah, Hendrick has been the one that's kind of led the forefront. The old saying is, Hendrick hires 4 athletic trainers, all the other teams hire 1. So it's kind of, they follow what Hendrick does a little bit, but not exactly what they do. Yeah?
Do these fire suits prevent kind of the physiological adaptation to sweat rate? You sweat earlier, again, whenever you train. Do they inhibit that?
I don't know. We didn't measure sweat rate in the study. I can say from wearing one, when you take it off, it's drenched in sweat. As for the onset of sweat production and the amount of sweating, I don't know. I would assume that there would be some sort of adaptation that go along with it. I think probably sweat rate and sweat production would increase early on at the very beginning of the race as opposed to later on, just because they're already in that hot environment. So I would suspect that, but I don't have data to back that up. Yeah.
Do they all teams, they essentially have the same suit because of safety regulations, or do you see some variability in the
Same suit.
Okay.
Same suit. One question we did have was that the color of the suit, whether it be a black suit or a red suit, and that was something we were going to pursue following this core term. So what Lightfoot hinted at a little bit was that this team Ganassi said, hey, we love this. We're going to expand this out. We're going to do this. We're going to work with drivers. You're going to have access to 10 more races. And one of the things we're going to look at was their dark suits versus their light suits. And the team folded and that went away. So that was one thing we were interested in. Yeah.
Do you have any idea how much weight they lose during a race?
Drivers or pit crews?
Either.
It has been rumored. Jimmy Johnson said that he lost 7 pounds in one race. As for pit crews, talking to him, they said they don't lose that much. I think one said he maybe lost a pound at a California race, but not much.
The Gatorade Sports Sciences Institute, worked to develop the in-car hydration system. Some of you may have seen commercials about it. So they built the system that a lot of these guys will use in the cars to try to, that has Gatorade in it to keep it cold and so forth. And they did a lot of testing where they measured weights in particular. And that's what they were seeing. They were seeing 4 to 7 pounds, 8 pound loss in the drivers. But most of them ignore the pit crews, which is interesting to me. So, Dave, will you tell them about what an average pit crew member makes at the Sprint Cup level?
Sure. Starting pay is about $90,000. And after about 5 years, if you're pretty good, you'll be making around 120. And I have heard rumors upwards of around 150 for some of the Hendrick guys. So it's not a bad way to make a living if you want to beat yourself up for, 10 months out of the year.
Yeah. We've got a tie-up here. We got any other?
Dave, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
You mentioned the different positions
Mm-hmm.
that are on the pit crew, and you mentioned some different styles of training.
Mm-hmm.
Are they position specific? Does the guy who's the shortstop do the same type of workout as the guy who's lugging the tire over the wall? Are they designed for each position, or is it universal for the team?
It's universal for the team. Some of the benchmark goals for, say, a bench press are varied for positions. So I believe the carrier, the goal is to be able to bench press 225, 10 reps. The changer, it's 145 for 10 reps. So there's an adjustment there based on body weight. But overall, working on grip strength and shoulder ability for a changer, no, it's not there. But that'd be something that I think would be great to pursue with them.
One last thing to say about this before we leave. Dave has been working with Stuart Haas, as he said earlier. They are very interested in coming down, so we're trying to arrange them to come down and visit. They're also looking to recruit while they're here. So if any of you think that you might like to take a swing at being on a pit crew, they will. Hopefully, we're looking at January.
January, yep.
Probably early January, and hopefully they'll bring a car down with them as well, and they'll come down and we'll do some of the normal testing we've been doing. So. Think about that, work on your agility, talk to Dave about some drills that you can work on, and, hopefully you'll wind up with a better paying job than your professors. Thank you all for coming today, and we'll see you next Wednesday.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.